time for an old jog down the beautiful road of gaming memories once again, where me and a few buddies share some of our fondest memories with our time during this most glorious hobby we call gaming. Whether happy or sad, strange or funny, sit back, relax, and let us regale you with our tales from within the deep recesses of our minds. And I'll kick things off with Spyro the Dragon. This game holds an incredibly special place in my heart, from being the first game I got my uncoordinated little baby hands on that hooked me on gaming, to making a completionist out of me. It also has the honour of being the first game that I finished to 100%. It dug its claws into me and lit a fire in my belly to beat games fully, most of the time. It's also one of the few games all of my siblings played, something we could form a connection over and just sit around and play as we took turns playing. I just have too much of an attachment through this game that it's hard to pick one. But if I did have to choose, I do think my most specific memory ties into the completion aspect of it, with the treetops level being the one that exemplifies it. Throughout the level, you'll notice there is a far off place in the distance that holds a lonesome trapped dragon, and some of those precious gems. And there's no easy way to get to it. So it's up to you to try using the many slopes to supercharge to find a path that allows you to get to that location. As a child, I remember it taking ages to figure this shit out. It still took me a few tries now as an adult to try find the right way to go about using the supercharge in order to get where I wanted to go. And it's so much fun. It's a little puzzle they throw at you to try figure out how to best use the game mechanics you've been using up to now, and there's nothing quite as satisfying. Especially when I was a kid. Made me feel like bloody Einstein when I figured it out. And back then, it was a different ball game. Today we can simply find out how to do everything in a game just through the internet. And I feel that can take away a lot from a game. Heck, I know that's the case, as it's something I do when certain collectibles in a game just go beyond me. It takes away that sense of accomplishment. And yes, I could just not check this stuff up, but I'm a weak-willed man, and I ain't escaping the cold, dark grip of convenience when it comes a knocking for certain collectibles in games. I don't think I'll ever get as good a feeling as I did back then with the treetops supercharge to get that dragon and gems. Because I was right chuffed. They were simpler times. But, onto one of my buddies to talk about their gaming memory.
I don't remember a distinct moment or a particular day when I started to love the Tony Hawk series, but I know I was very young, and I know that the series has a very cemented special place in my heart. It made me interested in skateboarding, although to this day I've barely managed to balance on one properly. But through the immersive world of video games, I was able to experience being the actual Tony Hawk. Or well, close enough. I remember opening up the PC version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, the music and sound effects digging their way into my brain instantly and staying there for an eternity. I wasn't very good at video games when I first played, so I repeatedly jumped over this helicopter and memorised this area like the back of my hand. It was really fun playing the remake version a few years ago, I tell you that. I could complete it almost immediately and I felt this sense of smugness. Anyway, I have lots of memories after that, playing the PS1 version with my dad in the living room, PS1 happily hooked up to the CRT. I remember failing a trick at one point, the character crashing to the ground and then in a surreal kind of way glitching out and sliding all over the place face down. It was hilarious and I was glad it was a video game and not my real face. After this, I moved on to the PS2 games. This intro horrified me to no end in Underground, and this particular level also completely freaked me out, being the scaredy cat I was. However, nonetheless, I was extremely entertained. I thought the fact that you could get off your board was the most insane element ever implemented into a video game. Of course, this thought was then replaced by being able to ride a bike in American Wasteland. American Wasteland is still my personal favourite too, and I'm really fond of the story. I remember playing these games on my own, trying to impress my family with my perfected virtual tricks, and enjoying the two-player modes with my cousins. and I loved expressing myself through the outfits. I felt so much excitement when I walked inside these shops for the first time to buy a shirt or board or some hair. I loved practicing the tricks I wanted to accomplish, completing all the challenges, and speaking to all of the cool people in these new and different places. I loved the GBA and DS versions. The fact I could bring this game with me on the go blew my mind. I never fully completed any of the games until I was in my 20s, and despite only playing the early levels when I was a kid, they still became my favourite games of all time. The days when I couldn't decide what to play, I would default to picking up these discs over something else. And you know what? I think I still would. Thank you so much to Frames for inviting me to do this and giving me the opportunity to share this gaming memory of mine. It's always a joy to go on a nostalgic trip down memory lane. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm off to pretend I'm Tony Hawk again.
Howdy friends in gaming, it's Keith here from Steamy Streamers. My gaming memory that sticks out in my mind is when I was about, was I about 8 possibly? It was when the first Pokemon Stadium was out, and this was during the peak of Pokemania. This was during when like regular shops like Brown Thomas that we had over here in the UK and Ireland, which mainly sold like clothes and perfume and all different things, were selling the Pokemon CD. Do you know, that type of crazy Pokemania? So when Pokemon Stadium first came out, I had the image in my mind from looking at magazines. I kind of fused it in my mind of Pokemon Snap and Stadium through the pictures I was looking at. My child brain wanted the full 3D version of the Game Boy games. So I was dying to get this game. I remember I used to go into my dad's office on the weekend when he used to do extra work and hang out in there, and we'd go into the city afterwards and just look around. And I remember we were calling up every shop looking for Pokemon Stadium. It was the hot shit, do you know what I mean? And so eventually we rang one store and they said they had one copy left. Now, my dad knowing how much I was looking for this for weeks, we dropped everything. We got into the car, we drove straight into the store. And once we got there, we went up, it was on the top floor, I remember specifically, and I remember running to the desk. Like, you know when you're so excited, like I still get this, you know, if there's a special edition or I'm super excited about something, like, you can't wait. Do you know what I mean? There's no waiting. You need it now. You're afraid it's going to be gone. But once we got there, they were like, here it is. And what they proceeded to bring down was a giant Pokemon box battle set, Nintendo 64, that had the game with it. Now, I already had a Nintendo 64, I had a second-hand one. And I remember looking at this battle set, like, salivating. And obviously, like, a whole new N64, like, we can't get that. So I was like, please, I need it. We have to get it. So what we did was, we ran home, we got my old N64, we took it to cash converters, like sold it second hand, got a bunch of games. Now, it definitely didn't make up for the price of it. My dad definitely did me a solid and went in, but we both went in, got the Pokemon Stadium battle set and brought it home. It came with the VHS as well. Now, this is not the Pikachu Pokemon, by the way. This is literally a normal looking Nintendo 64. It's blue and yellow. It only released in Australia and the UK, so it's actually one of the rare Nintendo 64s and has Pokemon on the top of it. And to this day, it is still one of my favourite gaming items. However, I will say when I played Pokemon Stadium, I was a little disappointed to find out that it was not a 3D version of the Game Boy games. That I will say. Now, I appreciate Pokemon Stadium a lot today, but back at the time, I was like, this is just the battling. You know what I mean? There's none of the role play action. The mini games were fire though. And I did grow to love it. And the fact you also got the expansion pack with the battle set too to play your Game Boy games on your Nintendo 64. Very, very cool. Guys, keep up the great work, and thank you for allowing me to speak my story.
Get over here!
Hi, Shane, aka SteadySphere here, and Pat has kindly invited me to share a fond gaming memory in his latest video. When it comes to fighting games, we all have our preferred series. Whether it's Street Fighter, Tekken, or Clay Fighter if you're feeling spicy, we have that one series we keep up with no matter what, even through the weaker entries. For me, Mortal Kombat is that series. It was all cemented one day in the early 2000s, when my best mate brought over VHS copies of both movies, yes, Annihilation included, and his PS1 copy of Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Essentially the final cut of Mortal Kombat 3, it also restored stages and fighters from the first two games, kind of like a fond farewell to the 2D era, as Mortal Kombat 4 would jump into full 3D after. After watching both films, and at the very least enjoying one of them, we booted up our PlayStation 1 and grabbed some cheat codes, which my bud had pinched off the internet. The main one we used was one-button fatalities, and we battled each other for hours while getting to see all the wild fatalities. It is pretty cheesy now, but at the time, seeing Ermac repeatedly pummel someone until they turned into bones, or Jax grow supersize and step on his opponent, was wild for us youngsters. So while I didn't play any of the games prior, that day of Mortal Kombat binging cemented my love for the series to this day, even if the entry quality has been up and down at times. We even had another repeat of that day of sorts, when Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks come out, and we binged that game on co-op for hours. Thanks again to Pat for inviting me to partake in another video. Be well and stay safe, everyone.
When Pat asked me to share a gaming memory, I actually had trouble coming up with just one. Do I talk about my first experience playing Metal Gear Solid on Boxing Day 1998, where the game enthralled me enough to play through it in one sitting? Do I talk about finally figuring out how the mechanics work in Dick Tracy for the NES, and realizing that it's a smarter game than I initially gave it credit for? Or what about that time in junior high where I injured my back and had to spend the holiday break laid up on the couch with only NES X-Men to keep me company? Then there's getting to play Shadows of the Empire for the first time after getting it for Christmas, playing that Hoth level for the first time, and having my dad walk in and ask what movie I was watching. One thing I realized with all of these memories is that they all revolve around winter. Because of that, there's one in particular that I had to go with. But strap in, because it also requires some context. See, I grew up in rural Manitoba. For those unfamiliar, Manitoba winters are notorious for their harsh conditions, extreme cold, and large quantities of snow. Such was the case on a particular day in 1996 when I was in junior high. Overnight, we had gotten hit with a blizzard which dropped about 3 feet of snow on us. Waking up to the joy of discovering that school was cancelled that day was quickly overshadowed by the fact that I was tasked with shoveling all of that snow out of the driveway, so we could, leave the house. If that weren't bad enough, it was cold. I'm talking minus 30 Celsius cold. It literally took me all day to shovel all of that snow, and by the time I came inside that night, I was bone tired and absolutely frozen. Now, if you've watched the NES videos on my channel, you'll probably be familiar with me talking about how the local rental store in my small town was selling their NES games 3 for $15. I mentioned this because my parents had gotten me some of those games for the upcoming holiday, but because I had just completed such a monumental task, they'll let me have a couple as a reward/thank you. The ones they gave me that night were WWF Wrestlemania Challenge and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. WrestleMania Challenge was fun for a bit, it was goofy, it had wrestlers I remembered, and it was made by Rare. The real point of this memory was when I started Robin Hood. I didn't know what to expect, even though I knew it had gotten the cover of Nintendo Power when it released. So I started the game, was immediately thrown into the Jerusalem prison, and discovered the action RPG nature of the game. I was immediately drawn in and could not stop playing. So there I was, wrapped in a blanket with a giant mug of hot chocolate, sitting in the glow of the Christmas tree lights, and enthralled by the exploits of Robin Hood because they were my exploits. The horse chases, the one-on-one sword fights, the large team battles. It all felt exciting and, at the same time, cozy and inviting. That night, playing Robin Hood had an indescribable magic, which led me to hold a dear spot in my heart for that game, even 30 years later. There's a reason that we made a dedicated weekend rental video for it. Even thinking about it now makes me want to grab some hot chocolate and a blanket and load up the game again. Which, you know what? That sounds really good, so I think I'm gonna end here and go do exactly that.
And that wraps up Volume 4 in the world of our gaming memories. Special thanks to my friends for sharing these memories. I can't get over just how fun and cool it is to hear their moments from gaming. It's a pure joy. Also, go check these beautiful people out. They make such wonderful content, and they deserve a whole lot of love. Also, if you wish to come on and share your own gaming memory, let us know in the comments. I'd love to have anyone on to talk about their gaming memories. And until next time, folks, take her handy.